let's do a Q&A. Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is Abby. If you are new here, I would love if you would subscribe and hit that notification bell. Today, we are going to be answering your burning questions. I posted on Instagram and said, hey, I'm doing a Q&A on my channel and I want to hear about questions you have about motherhood and dating and relationships and modesty and personal questions. Any questions you guys have, and today we're gonna answer those questions. So I'm really excited to hop right into it. I hope you guys are excited too. Maybe your question will be answered, so stay tuned and let's get right into it. The first question is, do you find that there's more sexualizing of women who dress modest versus dress provocative? I think this is a really interesting question. The question to me means, do women who dress modestly actually get more sexualized? And my guess is no. Now, the other thing I wanna talk about as regards modesty is, does it matter whether people choose to sexualize you, right? Like, I am sexualized on the internet all the time. I dress really modestly. Just because men who are gross are gonna be gross no matter what, doesn't mean that I should dress immodestly, right? Like, if I dressed modestly or immodestly, they would sexualize me either way. Well, that's on them, it's not on me. For me, I know that when I was dating, the kind of guys that I would want to attract are not the kind of guys who would sexualize me no matter what, or who only wanted to have a one-night stand. I wanted to attract the kind of guy who wanted to get to know me and my personality. And if I'm dressing in a certain way, it's going to attract a certain type of man. And I would be giving men the signals of what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a guy who takes me seriously and wants something more serious. If I'm dressing in a way that's immodest, it only hurts my chances of getting what I want. So whether or not a bad guy is going to sexualize me, it shouldn't affect the way that I dress modestly, because modesty is a wonderful tool for me, and it's a respectful way to approach the world. And bad guys are always gonna be bad guys no matter what you wear. But good guys can be better and can avoid the distraction of your body if you give them the tools to do that and allow them to get to know you. Are they going to find you beautiful and attractive even if you dress modestly? Yes, but they're not going to be sexualizing you right off the bat. Whereas a bad guy is going to choose to sexualize you in either way. Which stage do you find more difficult? Newborn, infant, or toddler? They're difficult in different ways, but for sure for me, the earliest stage, like the first 3 months, is the hardest. That's different for everybody. Some people love the newborn stage. I'm not a huge newborn stage person. I like elements of it, but I think for me, when things get good is when we have a little more of a routine, a schedule, and my babies start to show their personalities. So that's like 3 months and on. The first 3 months is just hard because you're super sleep deprived and your baby isn't really responsive to you. So it's all your love going in and not so much coming out. The toddler stage is hard for different reasons because you're moving from caretaking into parenting. But if you're intentional about the way that you parent, I don't think it's that difficult, and you can communicate, which I love. I love communicating with my son. I think it's just the best thing ever. So that is the less hard part of toddler parenting, is that he can tell you what he needs and wants. Is it exhausting? Yes. Do I get 10,000 steps a day without trying? Yes. That to me isn't as hard as being sleep deprived, not being able to understand what the baby needs from me, being anxious about their sleep, being anxious about their nursing, all of those things like that you can't really control become less important over time. I got a lot of questions about breastfeeding, and I love talking about breastfeeding, so I'm happy to answer some of them. Have you had any latch issues with babies? Have you done bottle feeding? Do you pump? Just had my first. So I didn't have latch issues with my babies, but I had, different problems with each one. With my first, I caused an oversupply in my body and I pumped with him, but I really had created my own problem by using the haka in a really intense way. When I was nursing on one side, I would put the haka on the other. And so my body basically was like making enough milk for 2 babies. And that created a whole host of problems. My son was really good. My first was really good at nursing. It just that having an oversupply was uncomfortable for him and for me. My second had some issues with latching where he was always clicking, and I worked with a lactation consultant and it was positional. He has a little bit of a high palate. He doesn't have any tongue tie issues or anything like that, but he kind of just grew out of it as he gets older, which I find is often the case. Is the baby needs to learn how to nurse in the first 3 months. Again, why the first 3 months are hard. Babies are not very good at nursing. And then after the first 3 months, like, it's easy peasy because they can start to hold their head up and they can start to be a little more in control of what's happening, as opposed to just always the mom having to feed the baby. The baby wants to come to mom. Do I pump? This time around, not at all. Didn't pump I don't think once, which has been lovely because I don't have to clean anything, and I hate having to clean stuff. I hate having to pump. I'd rather be an exclusively breastfeeding mom and not be able to go out a lot than have to clean pump parts and do all of that. It just drives me crazy. I don't think there's anything wrong with it. I just don't like it. And my sons didn't really take bottles because of that. Ideal number of kids to have. So I personally think 3 is the minimum people should have. Obviously 2 is normal. Like 2 is normalized. 2 is what most people will have. But 3 is a little bit above replacement rate. So that's good. I like that. And then any more than that is amazing. So there's no ideal number over 3. We would love to have more than 4, but whatever God gives us, whatever we can manage, that's the goal. We'd love to have a large family. But for me, it's like anything above 3 is great. Can you explain modern Judaism? How Old Testament laws translate to modern day? I'm probably not the best person to answer this just because I can answer it from my knowledge as an Orthodox Jew, but I'm not a rabbi. Like, that isn't what I study, but it's what I do and live. What I can say is modern Orthodox Judaism is being a part of the modern world while keeping the laws of the Old Testament. And rabbinical law works with how the world changes and moves to incorporate that stuff into law. So, for example, we're not supposed to use fire on Sabbath. But we kind of over time have developed electricity. So how does that come into play? We're allowed to set things on timers before Sabbath starts and not use electricity by touching it ourselves on the Sabbath. Instead, we can set things to go on and off before Sabbath starts. That's a way that we can keep with the original law in our modern era. So we are not a faith that is stagnant and doesn't change and says we have to stay back in the before times and the olden times. We have to adjust using what we know and understand about the law and what we know about modernity. So that's how we have adjusted our faith over time. And it's not that we are changing laws, it's that we are taking into account what is new. There are certain things that we will not ever allow. We won't ever allow driving on Sabbath because one of the most important tenets of Orthodox Judaism is that we can only live within a certain area of our synagogues, and that allows us to all be really close physically on Sabbath, so we can all walk to each other's houses and the kids can go play. As soon as cars get linked into this, then everyone's really spread out. You have to drive to go to someone's house. You have to make plans, as opposed to everyone's out within 1 square mile. Everyone can walk to each other's houses because everyone knows that they're there, and you can go play with each other's kids. That's a huge difference that being able to drive totally gets wrong. And that's actually been an issue with the conservative movement, is that as soon as they allowed people to drive, people stopped going to synagogue as much. If you could drive to synagogue, why not drive to the zoo? And you didn't have that sense of community anymore. So that is kind of how the laws of the Old Testament have been brought into the modern day, is through rabbinical law. Was I ever not pro-life? No. I was always really pro-life, and that is because when I was about 13 or 14, I found a book at the bookstore all about pregnancy and how the baby developed from the very beginning, and I thought it was so incredible and such a miracle that I couldn't understand why someone wouldn't be pro-life. It was very difficult for me to understand. Now as an adult, I can understand the arguments for why someone would be pro-abortion, but they're just wrong. And if you look at all of the pro-life arguments, it's really hard not to be convinced of the fact that life begins at conception. What's my favorite animal? I don't know why, but horse is popping into my head. I love horses. What's your skincare routine? It's flawless. I actually did a video about this a long time ago because I used to have terrible skin. I had acne all over. There was a lot that went into me clearing up my skin, but mostly it was realizing that any topical treatment I did, I had to use for the full 6 weeks. I kept trying for 3 weeks and then it wouldn't work and I would just dump out and be like, it doesn't work. And I learned that using skincare for a full 6 weeks is necessary to start to see small changes. As soon as I started using these topical ointments from my dermatologist for a full 6 weeks and started to see small changes and then used them for a week beyond that and a week beyond that, then I could start to see improvement. It was that, it was using like a silicone vibrating brush. Those really helped clear out my skin. And yeah, I mean, I think just growing up, I think those were the things. I mean, I was in my mid-20s before my skin really cleared up. How does your husband deal with the vulgar comments made towards you? It used to be a little more jarring, I think, but as time has gone on, we're just kind of like, oh, okay, people say stupid things. And he feels the same way. He's like, yeah, people say stupid things. I have an awesome, beautiful wife, but it's just people saying dumb things, and you can kind of get over that once you realize how it's really not important. How to transition to modest clothing without throwing out your entire wardrobe? That is a great question, because I went through a period where I wasn't dressing as modestly, and how do you kind of do that? How do you keep some things and get rid of some things? So there are certain items you will have to get rid of. Really, really short shorts, like that's just not gonna be a really good fit. There are most things you can actually make work. So if you have like a spaghetti strap dress, you can start by wearing a shirt under it. If you have a crop top, you can start by wearing a fitted dress underneath it so that you don't show your belly. If you have a lot of leggings, you can get some long tunics. If you have a lot of dresses that are short, that I would say is a little more complicated, but you could start by wearing leggings underneath them and then maybe transition those out of your wardrobe over time. Or you can, if you like sewing, you can kind of sew a frill on the bottom and make it longer. I've done that with some dresses. I find that TJ Maxx has a lot of great clothes that are longer. I mean, we're in an era of midi length clothing that is amazing. Like when I was in high school, nothing was a midi length. Everything was a mini skirt. So if I found a skirt that came to my knees, I would buy it no matter what, even if I hated it, 'cause like nothing was long enough. But nowadays, so many clothes are long. So you could definitely find pretty inexpensive options to add to your wardrobe that are longer. And I think that's kind of a good starting place, is work with what you have and then slowly build up a wardrobe that is more modest over time. Do you still sing opera? I sing all the time around my house. Do I sing professionally? No, because I'm a stay-at-home mom with my kiddos. And also I am a religious Jew, and you would have to perform and rehearse on Friday nights and Saturdays, which is my Sabbath. And I also don't want to perform and rehearse at night because I want to be able to put my babies to sleep and I want to be able to spend time with my husband. But if someone were to offer me a concert or something where it's not a ton of rehearsal time and it's like one night, absolutely, I would love to. What's your honest thoughts on liberal women? Do you have liberal friends? I do have liberal friends. Honestly, if we don't talk about politics, we can be friends. And actually, this one liberal friend I have, we can talk about politics. But for the other women who I know who are liberal, who I'm friendly with and are my friends, we just don't talk about politics. We talk a lot about like life. Like, what are you doing with your day to day? Often, my liberal friends are liberal on paper, but in practice are living out conservative values. Like, they are married, they have kids. And so if we talk about their feelings about certain things, okay, maybe they're more liberal, but at the end of the day, our lives look pretty similar. So it doesn't really matter. I think it would be difficult for me to have a friend who is liberal, who is living out a totally different lifestyle. And the reason I say that is just because there's just not that much you have in common after a certain point. It's not that I can't be friends with you. It's just if you're doing something totally different than I'm doing all day, every day, there's just not so much to talk about. And so I'm happy to like be friendly with you, but what do we commiserate about? What do we share opinions and advice on? Not so much over time. So that's really the biggest thing. It's not so much about what you think, but more about where we're both at. So I got a lot of questions, and it's funny, I started off with the question about my husband and how he reacts to the gross comments, but I got a lot of questions about how do I feel about being sexualized online. It is what it is. Like, it's nothing. It's people being stupid and people being gross and thinking they're funny when they're absolutely not. It's like that really annoying kid in class who just keeps bothering the teacher and you're just like, can you stop? No one thinks you're funny. That's what it is. I'm like, can you just stop? You're bothering the people who want to hang out in my comments and actually have a conversation and are here for the right reasons. You're just annoying and you're not funny. Like, that's what it feels like. I don't care about it emotionally. It really doesn't affect me. It's kind of like, oh, you want to say a stupid thing? congrats, you did it. But from the perspective of they are harassing others in the comments, that I don't like. I don't like that they're harassing my followers. I just think that's rude and inappropriate. Encouraging a friend who's made opposite life choices from you. High value friend. This is something I think is interesting. It depends what those opposite life choices are. If they are making opposite life choices and I think that their life makes sense for them, I can encourage them. But I'm not going to encourage someone to make life choices that are different from mine when it's not a positive life choice. And you might say, like, how do you know what's positive for them? Because I care about them. Because I am their friend. I can look at the way they're reacting and responding to their lifestyle and say, oh, this doesn't look positive for you. I don't think it makes you a good friend to encourage or support someone in bad decision making. And I think that's a very female thing. It's very female to just be like, you do you, you're awesome, keep going, you're great. Like, no matter what you do, just keep doing it. And I will be there to say you are doing the right thing. That doesn't make you a good friend. A good friend is somebody who is willing to tell you when you're doing something that's not good for you. A good friend is someone who is willing to risk the friendship for your sake. And that's not easy to hear, but it's the truth. I mean, there are friends that are going to make poor choices, and you can see it in the way that they're anxious or depressed or feeling down. And you are, I think, a better friend if you say, let's talk about the choices you're making and let's see if we can help you make better ones, as opposed to, just keep going, girl, you'll be fine, you don't need to be anxious. Like, how, in what world is that helpful? I think that being a high value friend is looking at your friend's decisions with her and coming up with a plan together to say, like, hey, let's get you back on track. How do I deal with coworkers who judge moms for only working a few shifts a month? That's a hard one. I would say disregard them in your heart, meaning try to not let that permeate what you're doing, because you know that your kids and your family come first. From a practical perspective with those coworkers, just be endlessly positive about the choices you're making. That's what you do. If they're saying like, oh my gosh, you never were here, you're never working, you don't take your job seriously, all you have to do is be like, yeah, but I get to be with my kids. And I can see what an amazing gift that is. Like, I feel really blessed that I get to do that. Don't put them down, but raise up your own choices and just continually show how happy you are for what you're doing. If they are making you feel bad or are judging your work, just be like, I know I can do all of my work in the time that I'm here, and at home I get to really focus on my kids. I find that it's really easy to be negative about what other people are doing rather than positive about your own choices. And instead flip that. Be positive about what you've decided to do, and what are people gonna do? Fight with you? I mean, they can, but if you continually just show how happy you are and proud of yourself you are, that you've made these choices, I think that people will kind of back off. Fave brands to shop from. Brands and stores, I would say, are kind of the places I shop from. So Amazon, TJ Maxx, Target. Those would be my 3 places that I really go shopping. And then everything else is like a one-off or a gift. Since being a mother, have any opinions you held before having kids changed? That's a good question. So something that I hear all the time, which I really hate, is the concept of I was a better mother before I had kids. And people say that in the context of like, oh, I said my kids would never throw food on the floor, and I said that my kids would never cry in public, and I said my kids were never gonna have a tantrum. I hate that. I don't think it's true. And I'll tell you why. Because I never said that I wouldn't allow my children to do natural kid things. Like, I never believed that I was never gonna have kids who cried or threw tantrums or like did any of that. But after becoming a mom, I became so much more intent about following up, reading books, and like doing research to find answers to the things that I was coming up against. So I became a better mom after I had kids. I wanted to improve constantly, and I wanted to understand why my children were doing this and doing that, and how I could get different reactions and improve my relationship with them and get them to be better as they grew. Like, I wanted to be a better mom, and they inspired me to do that. I think often people say like, I was a better mom before I had kids, because they want to justify that they don't have that intentionality and now their kids are a problem and they are like so confused. What am I supposed to do? You're supposed to look it up. You're supposed to ask friends, ask family, get wisdom from your mom, research online, like search on Instagram. I get a lot of answers from Instagram, and I find that I've become a better mom after I had kids because I look for answers. I don't just assume, well, this is how things are, and deal with it. Like when my son started having a bout of the terrible twos, I could have just said, well, I was a better mom before I had kids because I would have never thought he would act like this. But instead of saying just that and then leaving it be and allowing my son to spiral into the terrible twos, I did a ton of research about like, how can I help him? How can I understand him better? And I think that that has been a huge improvement. Like he has not acted negatively since I incorporated that stuff. So what has changed after becoming a mom? I've become a better mom since having kids. What advice do you give to teens who want to become stay-at-home moms? The truth is, I give this advice across the board. Do research into jobs that are part-time or that are something you can enter, step away from for a long time, and then re-enter. So you can't guarantee, right, when you're gonna get married and when you're gonna have kids. Find something that you enjoy for the moment, but that if you were to take 20, 25 years off, that you could re-enter the workforce and it wouldn't hurt your resume. And before you get married and before you have kids, you are still doing something you enjoy. So for example, nursing. Nursing is like the perfect example. Being a nurse is a really good option because it can be something you're passionate about. You can be really good at it. And then you can take off time to have a family and be a stay-at-home mom before you go back into work when your kids are grown. So I think that that's a really good way to approach working and not just saying, okay, well, I'm never gonna get a job, because you may need a job between the time you graduate high school and get married. So during that time, find something that you like, that is flexible, and that could transition into being a stay-at-home mom and out of being a stay-at-home mom. Do you take it really easy on Sundays? I think that's a cool tradition. For us, Saturday is Sabbath, so that's our community day, and then Sunday is our family day. So that's the day we like to go out and do things together as a family, and we just love that. Okay, we're back. This is a very long video and it got cut off in the middle, so let's keep going. How did you and your husband know it was the right time to have another baby? We want to have a big family. My first I had when I was 28. And so we are trying to have the majority of our children before, I'm over 35. It's not terrible to have children over 35, but we would prefer to not have too many kids after I'm 35. So we basically felt excited about having more kids at a certain point, and I couldn't ovulate while I was breastfeeding. So I basically said, I want to breastfeed to a year and then we can start trying. So I breastfed for a year and then I got pregnant. Travel location bucket list. That's fun. I would love to go to Greece, Santorini. I would love to go to France again. I've been to Paris. I would love to go to the Amalfi Coast. I would love to go to spend more time in England. I was there just a little bit. Scotland, Ireland. I would love to see parts of Spain. I would love to travel really Europe. Like that's what I'm most interested in, is the history and the beauty and art of Europe. And also I would love to see more states in the United States, because the United States is huge. So that'd be really fun. Your views on vaccines. I think I've talked about this before. I am pro tried and tested vaccines. I think that there's a lot of great things that come out of vaccines. My sons have their vaccines. I was very not comfortable with the COVID vaccine. So I did not get it. My sons do not have it. My husband does not have it. None of us got the COVID vaccine. We weren't comfortable with the COVID vaccine, and I am really grateful we did not get it. What is your favorite movie, or at least a top 5? Man, there's a lot. Lord of the Rings. You've Got Mail. Gone with the Wind. Gotta think of a musical. Oh, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. That's 4. We'll do that for now. But oh my gosh, I love movies. I love movies and I love reviewing movies. How was transition from 1 baby to 2? Expecting number 2 and starting to feel nervous about it all. Oh, I was so nervous about the transition to 2. Seriously, I remember crying even in the hospital, because after I had the baby, my son was with my parents and I was like all nervous and anxious that my second son was gonna feel unloved because I really had never been away from him, and we were away while I gave birth, and I was like, oh my God. The transition has been amazing. Like so good. Before you have your second, I recommend reading the book Siblings Without Rivalry. I talked about that in my last video. It really helped us a lot. And one of the things that we were really intent on was we didn't want our son to meet the baby in the hospital, because I felt like that would be confusing. Like, he meets the baby in the hospital and then he goes home and doesn't really understand that the baby's coming home. So it's like, okay, here's a baby and now the baby's in our house. I just wanted the only meeting to be in the house, where it's like, okay, we brought the baby home and the baby is staying. I think that really helped. And also, I've read a number of places that the mom should not be holding the new baby. You should keep your arms free and open for your older child so that they don't feel replaced immediately. It's like, oh, the baby's over here and he's in the family now, but I'm still mommy's baby. And that was also something. We called the baby your baby. Like, we told my son it was his baby, and I called my older son my baby all the time. I never said you're a big boy now. I never said like you're older and this is the baby. They were both my babies. I think that all of that together worked so beautifully for the transition, and they love each other so much. And it's really never been a huge problem. Like, there's never been any jealousy. And I remember just recently I said to my older son, like, oh, we're gonna go on a date, just you and me. And he was like, where's the baby? What? Why aren't we bringing the baby? And I just thought that was the sweetest thing ever, that he wanted the baby to come with him. So it's gonna be wonderful. The first 3 months, in the same way that having a newborn is hard, it's hard to do it with an older child because you're just not on a schedule yet, and your older child is on a schedule. So just like trying to manage time is hard. But once you come out of that first 3 months, it's really smooth sailing. Like, the two of them are going to love each other when you approach it the right way. And then the first 3 months are a little tricky because you're just trying to get into the swing. But after you're in the swing of things, it's great. Okay, so the last question is, do you have other hobbies you don't typically mention? And I feel like I have a lot of hobbies. I like writing. I like writing stories. I haven't done it in a while, but I do like writing a lot. I like drawing. I like sewing. I do like weightlifting. I wouldn't call it a hobby, but it's something that I do. I like interior design. We just redesigned our whole house, and that was really fun. Like, I love interior design, actually. And I like event planning. I like planning parties. So yeah, that's the kind of stuff that I really like to do, and those are my hobbies. So that is it for today. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below, and I would love to know if I answered your question, so make sure to leave that in the comments. And if you watched all the way till the end of today's video, leave a question mark emoji. That's an emoji, right? Thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye!